So, Digby, as we look back on this week, and there's a lot of analysis going on, obviously, about the race in Georgia. Some of it is sort of academic, and some of it is because people want to divine a lesson from Georgia and from Kansas that comports with how they want the Democrats to reform in many respects. And I think, one thing that I think there's broad agreement on is that the Democrats have to do a better job, across the board of winning elections. And, then the next question is, how one does that. And that's obviously where a lot of the fights are happening. But I don't think there's anybody who doubts that Democrats are failing if you just look at what's going on in this country in terms of who controls the levers of power. But there was some interesting data that came out this week, and you wrote about it at Salon, about whether Donald Trump won because of authoritarians or whether it was racism, or I guess whether it was his economic message, as it were. And, whether or not, I guess on some level, whether it was just sort of just pure on Republicans don't want a Democrat to win, and there were even more who didn't want a woman to win.
Well, yeah, I mean, apparently what happened was that they finally released, I think it's the American National Election Study, which is sort of the gold standard study in which, they go back and do interviews and crunch all and gather data on what shaped the race. And it goes all the way back to the late 1940s. That information was finally released. And as a result, all the political scientists are poring over it and trying to figure out what actually propelled this bizarre result of Donald Trump winning, and particularly winning the way he did, which, I mean, he lost the popular vote substantially, and he won in particular areas, and that makes it a very interesting kind of, set of circumstances to look at. And within the Democratic circles, of course, there's been an argument raging ever since November 9th about whether or not this was, he won because of his economic message or the fact that he was appealing to racist impulses or immigration or xenophobia or some combination thereof. So looking at all these things was kind of interesting when they finally got data in. And from what I can tell, reading, I've read 3 or 4 different takes on this.
Right.
It is obvious at this point that the true underlying reason that Trump won, the difference between Trump voters and everyone else, was racial attitudes. And it shows up in the fact that they're all much more hardcore on immigration, even than other Republicans have tended to be in the past. And they have much more, racist attitudes about African Americans. And this was the fundamental thing. Trump did something that Republicans haven't done in many, many years. He made a blatant, open, racist appeal. And neither, people say, well, Obama won, and, there were plenty of these people who voted for Obama. But the difference was the Republicans, McCain and Romney, did not make a racist appeal. They didn't come out and say, this is what what these political scientists are extrapolating from this data. So it's very, very interesting. And one of the results that I found particularly interesting, and you and I've talked about this before, which is the authoritarian strain in American politics and how that seems to be asserting itself in the age of Trump. And one of these political scientists wrote for the Monkey Cage blog at the Washington Post that he compared the data on race and authoritarianism and came up with the fact that he felt it was race, not authoritarianism, that was the primary motivator for most of these Trump voters. And I sort of took issue with that, just not because I'm going to argue with the data. Obviously it is what it is, but those two things go together in American politics.
I totally agree with you on this. I mean, and I think, and just, to sort of to reiterate, I mean, I have to say that I was one of those people who thought, look, I find it hard to believe there are people out there who are like, I'm not going to vote against the black guy, but I will vote I will vote for the racist, right? I mean, because that's the dynamic that's taking place there when you talk about those voters who either didn't vote, low propensity voters who didn't vote in 2008, didn't vote in 2012, or those people who switched from Obama to Trump. But I think the fact is that they didn't trust Romney and McCain to be white supremacists in the way that they trusted Trump. Like, in other words, and I'm also not convinced that from the perspective of a white male who was obviously a big voter for Trump, that there's a significant difference between, at least in terms of the way that they feel aggrieved, between a white woman and a black man or a black woman. Now, which is not to say that they wouldn't treat them differently, but in terms of this sense of like, hey, wait a second, I got to wait now it's one thing for me not to leave my house to vote against one non-normal president, but two in a row, I'm not standing for that. The impetus is not so finely nuanced between my hatred for black people and my misogyny. It's more just like, hey, it's not me. I'm not seeing a reflection of myself up there. And so, I don't make delineations between my disdain for blacks or browns or women. It's just that I want to see me, and it's an insult to me when I don't see myself in some way reflected in the office of the presidency. But look, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk more about this notion of authoritarianism and racism being more commingled, I think, than is given credit in some circles. We're going to take a quick break. Sam Seder, Ring of Fire. I'm talking to Heather Parton, Digby, and we'll be back in just a moment.